Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of our wonderful interviews. Now, we all know, and I've been saying this for some time, that we seem to be living in corporate Britain, where everything, the big boys, seem to be going down and looking out to take out, rather, the small guys, the small businesses. And we've seen that fairly recently with the attack on the Subpostmasters. You may remember there was a documentary on the television recently. I had Andrew Bridgen talking about it about this time last year, as he was the MP who was one of those who was exposing the corruption that had been going on and the faults with the Horizon computer system. Well, that hasn't stopped, of course. That corruption is still going on, and big businesses still seem to be ever more taking out the small guy. So today I want to talk about this with my guest, Edward Ottley, who is a managing agent for a small company, a property managing business. And he joins me now. Hello, Edward.
Hello, Richard. Thank you for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. Now, you approached me and you said that at one point you were a postmaster, but not in one of these smaller ones, but in a slightly bigger one where you were. And you saw this Horizon being introduced and the whole debacle going through. And then since then, you're involved in a different business. But I know that you felt ever more the legal pincers coming in, as it were, and really making life for small businesses very, very difficult. So we're going to sort of talk a little bit about that. But first of all, do tell me a little bit about what was going on back then in early 2000 with the sub-postmaster debacle that we've seen publicised fairly recently.
Yes, well, I joined the post office in 2003, had to have an interview, sign the Official Secrets Act, etc. So quite a major interview, but it was very much my own business in that there was a private shop as part of the premises, and a sub postmaster was an agent of Post Office Counters Limited. So we were remunerated for the products that we sold for the post office, but we were also responsible for everything.
Right.
So I was a four-counter post office, which actually I think is very important. We can talk about that in a little bit. But I was a relatively large post office, and in taking on the post office, I'm pleased I did pick a four-counter because there were already experienced staff there. One lady had been there since 1978 and had known the manual way of doing things. I'd taken over from a postmaster who's had it in his family. His father had been a postmaster, and he'd actually gone quite high up in the Federation of Sub Postmasters, to the point that he wasn't a remunerated official as such, but he represented sub postmasters at the highest level, at the national level. So I was very fortunate to be under his wing, especially now in hindsight with what's happened to
Yes.
postmasters, and the very experienced staff that I inherited. And yes, we had the Horizon system, and we had to do an account every Wednesday and every month as well. And you might be there till 9 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, where there were discrepancies, and you had to phone the Horizon system and say, "Well, what's going on?" My actual post office, when you opened up on a Monday, there was a queue down the road, literally, and on at Christmas and other particular times of the year.
Mm.
It was a very busy post office. So another good piece of news is that we were therefore very profitable for the post office. That's important as well.
I
And
suppose I should say this is pre-internet days, really, isn't it? The internet had just started to come on, an email, which must have reduced a lot of letters being sent, would have made that impact later on.
you're right. Yeah, I took over the post office branch when there was still substantial amount of mail packets. There weren't any competition from Amazon or DPD. It was all parcel force for parcels. We even had a footballer come in and send his football boots, because there was a high level football team in
Right.
town. it was very community based. People paid their bills in. They paid money in. Businesses came in, fish and chip shops, betting shops. People withdrew money from their bank accounts, paid money in checks. We encashed checks. We had saving stamps. We People came in to apply for a passport. So a sub postmaster was able to witness these forms. We were high level people. We felt very high level. We were the post office,
Yeah,
and you
which
felt
is a very important. I mean, certainly it used to be extremely important. If you wrote a letter, and as far as I understand, you gave it to the post office, it was then considered delivered. Is that correct?
absolutely, to the extent that if I look at my 104-page sub postmaster contract, which I read
Wow.
through, um, it very much covered everything, and it gave you quite severe guidelines. If you tampered with a letter or a packet or held up delivery, you could either, it's a serious offence. It might be 2 years in prison. It might be 10 years in prison. It even says in one part it might be life in prison, which sounds a bit extreme.
Yes.
But, we were very much on the front line. Businesses depended on us in that we had to, businesses brought in cash, but they also needed change. So we changed notes for the change that they needed for their tills. We were a responsible job, and also social security benefits, pensions. And we were always negotiating, though, with as time went on with the post office to say, well, we need this amount of cash to keep the business open. And they might negotiate and say, well, not sure about that. We say, no, we definitely need this. And we were actually, as things moved on, because they became a bit more holding on to their cash, the post office, we were dependent on betting shops really to bring us, oh, they're going to be in at 10 o'clock. Oh, fantastic. That will up our cash to pay out to people.
Right.
So we were at the hub of the community. In terms of security, we did have CCTV, which watched every counter position, the front of the shop, the back. We had coins out on display on the counter, sort of cash in drawers, and basically, I, as a sub postmaster, was responsible for all of it. The till, sorry, the safe that we had, and I must admit, when I first took over, the first couple of nights, felt incredible weight on my shoulders because of all
Yes.
this money that was apparently mine now. The minute it was delivered, it was my money. If I lost it, and even in the contract, even if you were robbed, you
You were
had to,
liable, were you?
sorry,
You would be liable.
you would be liable, and
Yeah.
you had to put up a good reason why you weren't liable for the cash. It had to be a very good robbery. In other words,
Yeah.
you mustn't,
Sawn off
yeah,
shotguns and ladies' tights over the head and all of
it
that
had
sort of
to be
stuff.
like that, really.
You didn't? Did you see any of that? Just as a, did you see anything like that?
Well, I personally didn't see anything, but the ladies who'd been there, as I say, for a number of years, had two robberies and had
Wow.
acted very bravely. I understand, and sort of their inner fortitude took in, almost the law of the jungle took in, and they sort of refused to hand over cash. So they did extraordinarily well. But while I was there, Lloyd's Bank just up the road seemed to act as a decoy, and they were robbed twice, armed robbery, only a couple of 150, 200 meters up.
Yes.
One, because of that series of events, we had a policeman standing on our door for a while at one stage. But our shop was robbed a couple of times, but overnight, and that's picked up on
On your
CCTV.
CCTV.
They took the till, but of course we didn't leave anything in the till.
No.
We had security panels at the post office, the counters end, at the usual glass fronted security. But it was very much a community in terms of the community as such. I was when I first took over for about a year. It took me a year to really get to grips with it, and I was embarrassed most days for a whole year. Luckily, I had luckily the other staff helped me. But I
Yes.
remember, you had every member of the community coming in, and I remember overpaying someone, for example. And I was told, oh, you understood they were a little bit of a family on the fringes. I think it either come out of prison or was just about to go in. I thought, well, how do I get my money back? How do I get the money back here?
Yes.
So got hold of his telephone number, which is community again, phoned up, said that I'd overpaid him, and he came back with the money, gave it back.
Wow.
Another lady.
How many people would do that these days?
Exactly. So another instance of community is that a lady who was a bit of a well-known shoplifter came in once with a massive pram but no baby in it,
It's a bit of
and
a giveaway, isn't it?
yeah, and picked up Ferris goods and went off. Again, got hold of her telephone number, address, phoned her up, and she brought the items back.
Good
So
heavens.
it, I think there is a protection in a community. They see the post office, or used to see it, as their
Mm.
post office. So actually, you felt quite safe in many ways. And so these days, where you see Tesco's, or small Tesco's or whatever, going around with sort of little bit of CCTV and audio on their body, on people's body, and also security guards, you think, well, we had thousands of pounds in our post office. We had none of that. It was
Mm.
purely community,
Yes.
people doing their bit for the community. And
and
so,
and and on the whole being decent people and helping one another, and we've seen that eroded over the last sort of 30, 40 years. So
yes.
when the horizon problem started to arise, and you saw your colleagues in the smaller post office, were you aware of that?
Well, interestingly, not absolutely aware. This is the amazing thing with the media, even though I was working locally, although I was aware of it enough to have kept a newspaper from 2009, where a colleague in another post office just a few roads away, but a smaller one, had been taken to court for theft, and it had been commuted to false accounting as he pleaded guilty before
Mm.
trial. And the papers were merciless. The local paper, there was a huge headline that I kept. It said, "Post officer, post owner boss cooked the books to hide cash." That was in 2009. But of course, in 2021, all those years later, he was quietly, as far as the paper here was concerned, he was one of the post 39 post masters who were, their convictions were lifted. It was said, well, no, you haven't done anything wrong
Yes.
on appeal. So with our post office, so that was a smaller one. So what I've noticed, if we look at the wider issue with the post office, is that although we definitely had discrepancies from time to time, and we made sure we counted and recounted, and we had auditors dropping in, which was quite regular every 6 months. They wouldn't tell you that they're coming, but they'd be outside when you arrived, and they'd close the post office and check everything. But the difference, I believe, between my post office and the smaller ones is that at the time they were trying to rationalize, or thinking of rationalizing post offices. Ours was a profitable one, but there were other smaller one counter, two counter post offices that
Out in the sticks,
out in
presumably.
the sticks that obviously weren't profitable in the same way. But there was
Mm.
a contract which meant that, for example, mine, you got paid an amount to open your post office, whether you did any transactions or not. And this was all in a contract. As I said, this 104-page contract.
Yes.
So the smaller ones, they were starting to wanting to slim the post office down. They so they wanted to privatise Royal Mail. And obviously, internet was starting to slowly come in as the years rolled on. And so I can see why, with the Horizon, with the bugs and the problems, and you wonder with my contract of 104 pages how the post office is so precise in there that they could allow something that was so imprecise by the sound of it, the Horizon. But anyway, let's say that Horizon meant that it's interesting, the smaller post offices, as Bates versus the post office highlights, seem to bear the brunt of these investigations and apparently losing cash, to the point that I would put an opinion that, especially as I've heard as well, that there was a back door into the Horizon where apparently to put things right, if it had gone wrong, but what if they weren't putting it right and just allowing it to continue?
Yes.
And just targeting, and it seems targeting these smaller post offices. So how would that benefit the post office? Well, one, the money that apparently had been missing, they could put to their profits. Two, they didn't have to consult with the community, so there's no problem there. They could just close the counter down and say it was the sub-postmaster's fault, because postmasters, if they were seen to have acted improperly, could be closed immediately or with 3 months' notice. So they had an incredible hold over postmasters. They could close them down overnight, close their income, and you know, they'd if it was the only job they had, which let's face it, it probably would have been, they would have been without remuneration and with the community on their back. Benefit to the post office is that they've closed the branch down, added, actually, instead of having to pay out to close the branch down, they've added to their profits with the sub-postmaster paying. And the population have seeing it as unfortunate, but it's that horrible, crooked sub-postmaster who's done that. So that's my opinion on that. And of course, the legal profession, whatever is said by the judiciary, I know the top lady, a lady who's the top of the judiciary, said the legal professions had nothing to do with this. But I would say the plea bargaining system, where people, and then let's concentrate on the sub-postmasters, the sub-postmasters were encouraged to plead guilty.
Yes, even though they knew they were innocent.
Even though they
Absolutely.
knew they were innocent.
And we're saying there must be bugs in the system, and yet the people were saying, no, computers are infallible, which is, you know, anybody who's had a Windows machine knows that they're just full of bugs. But anyway, so they're encouraged to plead guilty. I mean, this is, you know, this is like real good quality justice going on there.
Absolutely, to the extent that, you know, you're told, you know, it's theft, Mr. Sub-Postmaster, but if you plead guilty, it's false accounting.
Yes,
You
slightly
won't be,
lesser degree.
you won't be, it won't be a custodian, you won't go to prison, and you'll just have a community sentence order, 180 hours of unpaid service or whatever.
And a
But
criminal record.
but they tend to underplay the criminal record bit.
Right.
And of course, you know, to the point in this paper about this particular sub-postmaster, they said he walked free from court. Well, how did he walk free when he had to pay back the thousands that they said he owed? But not only that, he came away with a criminal conviction. Okay, didn't go
Yes.
to prison because he also had pleaded guilty to false accounting.
Yes. So, I mean, it would have destroyed your life, wouldn't it?
That's right. If you think about it, he had to then go 10 or 11 years with this playing on his mind. And the way it goes is, unfortunately, unless you get a Bates versus Post Office documentary, no one really knows about it. They always think
No.
it's happening to someone else. Oh, I don't know. So, and this is where the justice system is severely undermined, because this guilty plea, which, and if we look at the statistics, in 2017, I've got statistics from 86% of defendants pleaded guilty to criminal charges on a plea. And of therefore, the 14% that are left that do have a trial, only 2% of them had a trial in front of a jury.
Wow.
So it's hardly fair trial and justice. And it's actually got even worse now, where the government have brought in what's called a single justice procedure, where a single magistrate now and a legal advisor, because magistrates aren't legally trained
No.
as such.
You do wonder what they're doing there then. But
Exactly.
I guess they're coming with some sort of overview of life, I guess, to sort of give a moral judgment on top of the legal. Who knows?
Absolutely. So, but they've gone one step further now, where a magistrate can look at a criminal case, okay, not an imprisonable one, without anyone being present other than written evidence, and deal with the sentencing and prosecution. And there's actually a 90-second benchmark that the Ministry of Justice put against that. And so, in theory, in 90 seconds, a magistrate prosecutes somebody.
Good God.
And there's always an overperformer, and apparently a magistrate in Swindon has done very well on this by prosecuting 40 cases in 15 minutes and dispensing £54,000 worth of fines. So it's this sort of thing that we've got to be careful of. And the other infringement that's happening is judicial review, whereby the law also, or the courts, the judiciary are, as part of their role, are meant to be looking at the government, seeing, are they lawful in what they're doing? Are they acting lawfully? And it's called judicial review. And what the government are doing, of course, because the judiciary are part of the government, get paid by the government are able to put further obstacles. And the latest is that if there is a claimant who says that the government have acted unlawfully, a further act of Parliament has meant that you can only quash the government's acts and say it was unlawful, but it can't be retrospective. So the claimant, although bringing it, can't have any redress. It can only be going forward.
Going forward. So his case is clobbered.
Yes, absolutely. So where I'm moving the territory with this is that you've got all this plea bargains, people, single mothers, people who are got employment but need to stay out of prison. They're all going to want to be incentivized to plead guilty because they haven't got the time or the money to keep things going. I mean, if you plead guilty, the wait time to go for trial is 15 weeks, whereas if you plead not guilty, it's over 32 to 33 weeks, so twice as long. If you plead guilty, it's 1.6 hours. I'm reading off all these statistics, but that you'd have of a hearing. If you don't plead guilty, it's over 13 hours, 13.2 or so. So that you can imagine the cost is weighing up, not only the cost of having a solicitor, a barrister, but also the cost, say you have been put into custody, you've lost your employment. If you're a sub-postmaster, it's been closed down, or anybody else your business has been closed down, it can't work without you.
Yes, which has also affected the community. If you were a sub-postmaster and you've been shut down, you've got that on your conscience if you're thinking of stating your innocence, and you think, crikey, that's everybody behind me is saying don't do it. The pressure must be immense.
absolutely immense, and the psychology of it must be immense, and with everyone sort of against you in a way, and this ridiculous technical evidence, as you say, which is even enshrined in law that computers are infallible. You've got this technical evidence that's driving the case. No one can prove either
Yeah.
which way. Whereas in a normal scenario, in a proper fair trial, you're meant to prove someone's innocent until proven guilty. In this
Yes.
case, you're the accused straight away, and you've got a non-technical accused at that, and you've got to prove that the evidence is totally wrong, that it's that there is a problem with the
Yes.
computer system. So you can't talk into your wider community, you living there, immense
And
psychology.
if the newspapers have slated you for and assume that you're guilty without even getting to the trial to
Mm.
know whether you're innocent, I mean, you've been slated by the community. You're hanging your head in shame for something you never did.
And also, you're probably racking your brains and saying, well, how did that money get
Yeah.
lost? You may even say, well, that's my own stupidity. I'm just not good at maths or something, or I've just not added this up enough times, or there's something wrong in my. So you might start, that voice in your head you might start to doubt yourself.
Yes.
And so that's the thing. Now, where there's an interesting parallel here is that I survived all that, luckily, and really didn't properly understand what was going on there. To now moving into another area of life, having the post office in the end, we got to the stage where the amount of money you were making wasn't enough. The minimum wage was going up, costs, but the product payments from post office were going down.
Yes. And
You
I
could,
suppose a lot more was being done online.
exactly.
You people were encouraged to get their TV license and their banking and so many other things you could. And of course, Amazon came along and these big online retailers, which meant,
Yeah,
you weren't sending stuff quite so much.
absolutely. So so you have to start thinking about getting a new business. And I'd always be interested in property. So I'd let out some property myself, and then got involved with a university that had just set up in the town, had developed, and was housing students. So we developed the business. I was working from home to start with, and then moved into what would look like an estate agents to be close to the students and facilitate their needs, etc. And
Yes.
then one day we thought, I was doing this with my wife, and I'd still kept the post office going, interestingly, at the time, although eventually, because it was profitable, the co-op, as and facilitated by the post office, the co-op, local co-op, took it from me and paid an amount negotiated with the post office for me. So we managed to migrate the staff very well. So that was that. But then at the same time, this other business started to grow, and then we thought, well, as we are looking like an estate agent, we better open our business to other landlords and start letting their property out, that sort of thing.
Mm.
In my background, my father had been a builder, so I knew about property to a certain extent, and learned very fast. But and then it all started to grow. So then a landlord came in and said, "Oh, have you thought about running a development? Because I've got a flat in this block of apartments, and it's not being run very well. We do want a local person because our managing agent is based in London, and they're not very good. We do want someone in Suffolk to look after it." So I took it on, and it grew from there. And but remain a small business.
Yes.
There are these corporate businesses based in London, mainly Hertfordshire is quite common as well, with all the departments, legal, HR, all the usual things. I am the legal person in my. We now have got a finance manager, but we were very small and still are. Now that I'm making that point because now with having now faced what the small sub postmasters faced, I've now there's some allegations against me for a fire safety contraventions in a building that we manage. We don't own the building. We have no financial interest in the building other than the important thing, though, for people to know is that we represent the owners of the apartments.
Right.
There are two distinctions. With some apartment blocks, it's a landlord, the owner of the building, who's totally in charge, and they have a managing agent. With other apartment blocks, and luckily quite a few where we are, it's the flat owners who are in charge, and they can appoint their own managing agent, and they set the service charge, etc. But this fire safety allegation came along after the Granville fire, even though this isn't a high-rise block at all. It's relatively 4 or 5 stories. So I was put in the same place, sub postmaster, where you had, instead of the post office this time, the fire service brought a private prosecution. This is another thing. It's not the CPS, the Criminal Prosecution Service, who are experts in this. As with the post office investigators, it's really amateurs who have been given the opportunity to prosecute, part of government again, who can come in, use bullying tactics that we heard with the investigators. And, you know, on one level, they're meant to be inspecting the building to make sure it's safe.
Yes.
On another level, suddenly they're prosecutors to the point that, you know, it's alleged that we didn't have the right fire risk assessment or whatever. But then they're saying to me, well, you're under investigation now. So, you know, we can't do anything. We can't have any more meetings. And you think, well, this went on for over a year.
Right.
So you think, well, where's the fire safety for the building? But anyway, you move on and you think, well, these investigators, at the time, I did what everybody would do. Oh dear, better get a solicitor. Oh, a barrister, because that's what I'm up against, the county council, the fire service, up against people. And at that stage, it was a residence management company that were actually being, the allegations were against. And the barrister, of course, did what the post office barrister said. Even though they had reams of evidence to the contrary, it was, oh, we recommend that you plead guilty. Regulatory offence. Yeah, plead guilty.
Plead guilt instead of, you know, being the truthful state that you're actually in. Is the upshot, do you think, of all of this? I mean, you've done the parallel there, that really they're trying to get rid of the smaller businesses and using the legal arm of the government, I suppose, to elbow you out. Is that how you think is going on?
Very fair. That would be my opinion totally. If you look at the wider spectrum that I'm aware of with property, for example, all the other things that regulations are brought in, not only the high level fire safety, but energy performance certificates, where some buildings may never reach the desired level. Then other impositions on landlords, and we're talking about small ones. At the same time, they rubbish landlords in the press as if they're, you know, horrible people. But actually, quite often they might be an accidental one person got a property for their pension.
Like all things, one rotten apple, and all the apples are rotten.
Yes, but it's what seems to be happening is that with a combination of matters, higher interest rates, doing away with Section 21, where that's been threatened, where landlords now, if someone isn't paying their rent, they've got no means of asking them to leave the property. And also, so there's a whole conspiracy, it seems, against landlords, and managing agents are therefore. So I've broadened it into the buy-to-let market there that I'm aware of. And what I'm saying is that what with the attack on managing agents through fire safety, there's an attack on landlords, and interestingly, the government is coming up with solutions. And for example, if we take the Welsh government, they announced just over a year ago that they were going to help um, homeowners, because also with this fire safety, you've probably heard that so many owners of apartments are trapped in apartments where there's waking watch, which is costing a fortune. Insurance has gone through the roof because apparently their buildings have been condemned, etc., for fire safety. So there are these distressed people who can't sell their properties anymore because of this. Also, what then, even if they're moved out of their property, and we've got 3 buildings like that here where they've been totally moved out, they don't get any compensation for that. They still have to pay their mortgages. So you've got these distressed who want to sell, can't sell. So, who helpfully comes along? But government, and the Welsh government have announced this out in the open. We'll have a scheme where we'll buy properties off of distressed owners, and we'll let them rent it back from us. They can rent them back, or we'll give them a cash lump sum. And so you can imagine it's the same old, if we go to the Great Reset, you'll own nothing and be happy.
Yes.
And it's the same, there's lots of money to be made because the corporations, the big landlords tend to be corporations. If I mention a building here in Ipswich, and it's happening across the country, are also not only a government offering their incentive, but the bigger pension funds really that have this are saying, we'll buy your property off you, but obviously can't pay what you paid for it. And
Yes.
we'll take a discount on it.
Take a discount and a big property grab.
A property grab. So with us, there's let's close down managing agents, and we just want corporates. They just want corporate managing agents who have got the legal departments, will play ball, own the right, belong to the right organisations, etc., and will help us in our aims, the government, to turn this into corporate Britain, and also.
I was just thinking when you were talking about the energy stuff, presumably all of that is because of the net zero policies that they want, greater insulation and things like that, and making sure you've got heat pumps or whatever it might be on somewhat spurious science.
Absolutely. So you then got everything comes into play. It's almost as if there's a tick list that you can use, or the government can use, against the ordinary man or woman in the street, the small business, the community.
Yes.
And
we've seen the community being pulled apart. I mean, you, with the post office, and I know it might not have been profitable thanks to the internet, but I was thinking as you were talking about the post office, you've got the pubs that used to be part of the community, that's disappeared. The church that used to be part of the community, nobody's going to them. And the post office being that place where you could administer your life in pretty much all those ways. And I suppose banks to a certain degree, although we all know about fiat currency and stuff, but, the sort of mainstay of a community. And all of those small banks, especially in villages and places like that, they really seem to be trying to get people out of those places and put them into huge amounts of debt. But I want to move it on because you want to talk about a solution to all of this.
Yeah, I'm pleased you've moved us on, Richard. Definitely. The solution to all of this is, of course, I'm saying, of course, trial by jury. Now, people might say, well, what does he mean by that? What's a trial by jury? It's a jury trial, isn't it? Well, no, it isn't. A trial by jury is one where 12 men and women, okay, that is a jury trial as well, but 12 men and women are taken from the electoral roll at random. But the important thing of a trial by jury is that the 12 people are look at the law, the facts, and the evidence, and they do the sentencing as well. They judge, say it was a sub-postmaster, instead of him pleading guilty, he has fair representation in front of a jury of 12 people. They can see what he is. Was there any mens rea? Was there malice aforethought? Was there any harm, injury, or loss? What about this technicality with the computer? They could even think about themselves at home. Have we ever had any problems? They can
Did
look.
they get the blue screen of death from time to time?
Exactly. They can then look at the law through their consciences. This is an important thing, and say, well, actually, we don't. This is a bad law. We don't agree with this. And we don't believe this was premeditated. It's not a crime. Some money has apparently, according to a computer, disappeared, but there's no evidence that anything's been stolen. Therefore, we're not convicting this person. And in a trial by jury, if one person says we're not convicting, then the individual goes free.
Yes.
Now, trial by jury goes all the way back to the Magna Carta 1215, which is our constitution. And interestingly, there's a justice report 2023, which justice is an organization of upholding the rule of law and human rights, just making sure that it's to a high standard. And even in their report, because people can say, oh, well, what the hell's the Magna Carta? 1215, yes. 1215.
Yes, it's so long ago.
But it is referred to even and justice are made up of judiciary, legal professionals, and they say basically, that access to justice is fundamental to the rule of law. It goes back to the Magna Carta, in which it was declared that to no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay right of justice. And what is happening? It's amazing that they say that in their reports because,
yes.
It is being sold, isn't it? I was told by my barrister, oh, Mr. Ottley, plead guilty. Well, if you don't, I'm going to charge you thousands of pounds, sort of thing. So it's being sold. No one deny or delay right of justice. Well, it's being delayed. At the moment, there's 340,000 cases waiting to be seen by a backlog by magistrates, 62,000 by the Crown Court. So, trial by jury, which interestingly, the Justice Report, although it says everything about holding the government to account as well through judicial review, it talks about Henry VIII powers where government can, where you have acts of parliament, government can amend it very quickly without oversight by parliament. In other words, the executive, the government are getting far too powerful, and justice have said this. They're also putting obstacles in the way of true justice. But interesting in this report, they don't mention once trial by jury. Trial by jury offers everything. You go for your trial. No, you wouldn't have a barrister or a solicitor because they've sworn an oath to uphold the law, as in the legal.
The private bar guild.
Yeah, they're agents of the government, the acts of parliament, whereas trial of jury predates acts of parliament. It's the will of the people.
Yes.
There's no way it can be altered. So through a trial by jury, you're not only judging someone by their peers or the law of the land, because when you had 12 people, the idea was that they represented the land,
the community,
the will of the country. So you'd go in and they'd do everything that justice wants this report and these the judiciary want, actually, and that is that the government are held to account. Is that a good law or a bad law? Their authority, it's part of democracy. You're
Yes.
overturning majorityism with one person has the power of veto.
Which is very important because I've heard people say, because we've spoken about trial by jury last year in a few of the interviews that I did, and
Mm,
one of the arguments that I noticed coming up in the comments was these days the jury people, the men and women picked at random, may well have some very strange and convoluted ideas today, thanks to wokeism and some of the very peculiar things that are sort of deemed to be acceptable, such as men dressed as women in skimpy clothes doing story time for children. And however, within that 12, if one person can turn around and say, well, actually, I think whatever the crime or the case is, that actually I think morally this is abhorrent and abstains from the decision, then that's then they can't convict that person because somebody has stood up, and you only need the one. And I think
exactly.
that's a good. Why do you suppose? And I think we both know the answer to this, and probably the audience, but we may as well ask it. Why do you suppose it doesn't mention it in the document you referred to, and why is there a reluctance from what appears to be a reluctance from government and the judiciary themselves to implement what seems to be the most sensible solution that we once had and has been removed with this play on words of jury trial? Why do you suppose that is?
Well, I think that the legal profession is a little bit like the pharmaceutical industry. They've built up huge revenues based on acts of parliament, statutes, and they don't want to lose that revenue stream, huge revenue stream that they've got. Also, government would be running scared that they haven't got the hold on the man and woman in the street. The man and woman in the street isn't being paid for jury service, hasn't got a career to defend, won't be rubbished in the papers as a lefty or a woke lawyer, depending on whether the government want to get at a lawyer for doing something in someone's interest. So there's no way of getting at the man or woman in the street. So the government have lost power there. Also, it overrules, Parliament is being held to account, and government and departments, they don't like it in their cosy world. Oh, we're members of Parliament. Oh, we're now the government. We can. Oh, I've always wanted to get my hands on the levers of power. And the small man, as they would see it in the street, why should they? They can't tell us what
Yes.
to do. And they put obstacles in the way. I've found, for example, I'm now on I've had 7 hearings so far, and they've now penciled in a further 2 with one already booked. So by the time I get to a trial, I'll have had 10 hearings, and most of them were a waste of time. And there wasn't much to discuss because the important thing is to stay outside of the jurisdiction of the court, not do what the judge says. There's a script. If they ask you to sit down, I wish to stand where I am. I don't understand. I require a trial by jury. In other words, I don't stand under you.
Yes.
So it's
So
important
is that what you're saying? You are requesting a trial by jury every time?
every time you request a trial by jury. I want to give you this piece of paper, Mr. Ottley. They'll try every psychological ruse in the book, and
Yes.
it's not until you're practically up against it that you realise the theatrical performance, but also the highly psychological performance of the court. They're trying to catch you out all the time. We're taught that we'll be polite and I'll answer
Yes.
that question.
Yes.
I'm a decent person. I don't want to keep people waiting. When you go into court, it's a totally different setup. It's almost like an interrogation chamber at one end. They can get quite nasty. You're threatened with, if you abscond, Mr. Ottley, you'll be put in custody. You do this, you're on unconditional bail, we will allow you free. Well, unconditional bail is that you set free. It's just the language that they're using.
Yes.
Um, and so you're drawn into this highly psychological. I had to, we're going to bring psychiatrists in immediately, Mr. Ottley. We don't believe you can
You're not
presenting
fit. You're
yourself.
mental. Yes.
You're not mentally able. So I had to do my own mental assessment outside of that to say that I was. And then, so yeah, they're trying everything to stop you. And they will also, as I found out, because I've got all my learning from someone else who has put themselves through, luckily,
Yes. A
luckily,
mill.
the ordinary person might say, well, how do I get a trial by jury? And it all sounds very complicated. I luckily, through the Telegram channels, found a channel where they were talking a lot about common law, but in a very simple way, practical way. And that's where I'm being coached in this practical way. And the important thing is to keep to a script, and not get drawn in. The minute you start speaking to them, they'll
Yes,
try
because
and
they're trying to get jurisdiction from you, and once they've got that jurisdiction, they've nabbed you basically.
absolutely, and they'll try everything. In one hearing, I was told, oh, we're going to put you, we're not having you in this town. You're going to be tried in King's Lynn in a Nightingale court, or they'd show photographs in another hearing. Oh, we've got this court available here in this town. I'm wondering if we can get 12 chairs in there, and that talking to a barrister either in the court or on screen. So the amount of cost to everyone, if you think 7 or 8 hearings, they send you paperwork through the post. But interestingly, this year, another ruse, in January, I didn't get any paperwork. I only accidentally found out that there was going to be a hearing, and through an email that wasn't officially from the court. I then phoned the court when I first heard it, and the first week I heard, they said, "Oh, no, no, it's definitely April you're hearing, not January." Luckily, I phoned the next week. Oh, the judge has said, no, it's this week, Friday. And I know from the experience of this coach of mine that if I hadn't turned up on a Friday, they'd have arrested me.
For non-appearance.
Yeah, put me in jail for the weekend. This is my supposition, because this is what happened to this chap.
To soften you up. I mean, I've been hearing this a lot from people who are saying you get a date and then they change the date, and the letter arrives either the day after the date was supposed to happen or on that day, making it very impossible for you to actually attend, so that they can go, oh, you didn't turn up, Mr. Jones. So,
Yeah.
we've judged it in your absence.
This is exactly what they're trying to do. So to think that we've got a fair and just judiciary is totally wrong. People have got to change their mindset
Yes.
to
Yes.
realize that it's the law of the jungle, highly psychological. That well-meaning judge who might cast you a rather nice glance, or a well-meaning, pleasant glance, actually is out to get you. It's
Yes.
very hard for
And this is
people.
I was going to say, this is very difficult for people to comprehend, because we've been brought up to think that the justice system is separate from government and separate from a big corporation, and that it's supposed to be, not only justice to be done, but seen to be done. Well, it's all about seeing to be done, but not actually done, it seems.
You're absolutely right. And, it's even worse at the magistrates' court. So you've got to get out of there fast because they're not trained, as I said. And the Crown Court, you're up against a very wily judge, a barrister, very theatrical. So you mustn't get caught there. And when they talk about waiting lists for trial, you'd imagine it's to do with, because there aren't enough judges, or too many cases. But when you hear of me, practically, they're actually adding hearings. You think, well, couldn't that time be more usefully used
Yes.
to get down the list? So they're actively creating the list. And interestingly, with this last hearing that I had, I was actually put in with another hearing, well, another two hearings. So talk about that. We were ushered in, and on the screen was two barristers, very unprofessional, two barristers, and a chap obviously in prison talking about a murder trial.
in the same hearing
Same
that you.
same hearing, and our judge was talking to them and saying, "Well, I can't make March the 24th. When can you make it, Justice? Whatever." Oh, I suppose we'll have to. Oh, well, we've got him in custody for maximum length of time. Well, maybe we could we can
Extend
let
it
him
more.
extend his custody.
Good
So you think
God.
that poor prisoner there is
Yeah.
already had the maximum 180 days or whatever it is. These people talking about holidays and diaries, but me having to listen to all of it, plus another person having to listen who's ushered in same time as me with another fire safety issue, and then that is whisked away, and the judge then concentrates on us, me to start with. And you think this is all extraordinarily unprofessional. You've got three things happening at once. One's a murder trial. And the whole idea is, I think, to destabilize you, create
Yes.
maximum fear. There's a maximum amount of
Yes,
fear.
because there you are with one, sort of an excuse for like what you were saying, a fire regulation type thing that's not next to a murderer, to
Yes.
make the gravity of the situation. I mean, it's like crikey, and he's being sent down for 20 years, and that's by implication. It seems to me my understanding of courts these days is really just courts of contract, that they're just trying to, they don't want anyone to be innocent. They want somebody to pay for something, and they benefit on the back of it. And they all seem to be getting a payoff if they convict on anything. And it's really, as I say, my understanding is that it's contracts, and that you are the ones who become, like in a trust situation, the trustee who's actually got to do all the paying and everything, and they've taken the beneficiary role. And I understand what you've got to do is stand up to that and say, no, this is completely wrong. You're the trustee. You're the public trustee. They are, and so that means that you're the executor and beneficiary of your own situation, which I understand can kill these cases if you're familiar with this workings. But you've got to get your head round all of that. But the whole justice system, as you say, is and government, justice, corporations seem to be absolutely against the men and women who are just trying to get on and have small businesses, feed their family. And as you've given us the example of, this is happening widespread. And just briefly to go back to the post office, it's funny now, isn't it? I was saying to you before we recorded, here we are, I'm in a relatively large provincial seaside town with, I don't know, 180,000 people probably, and we used to have a very big post office. They shut the counters down, which had about 6 counters, and now it's in W.H. Smith's, and inevitably, and I go in there quite a bit, one counter is open, and the queues, people, especially around Christmas time, anyone sending parcels, it's like out the door, and it's very slow.
Yeah, you're right. It's same here in this town. W.H. Smith is where it is, and so many there were a lot of post offices in 2003 when I started. A lot of them have closed down. And yeah, there was that real community spirit. The lady who'd worked in my branch since 1978, her sister worked in a law, not the one that got robbed, but actually, no, a Barclays she worked in, but
No.
Barclays on the edge of town, and had worked there for a number of years, and worked there actually until, luckily, she retired just as it was closed down. But so many, as you say, banks, all the post offices have closed down. In our post office, yeah, you supported people really. You got to know Mrs. the pensioner from down the road, or the rather interesting chap who always wanted new £5 notes and sparkling 50p's. You had to give him
Yeah.
the right notes, and he was very deliberate in his delivery. And then also the language of some people, they might, say that they wanted a lot. You had to be very careful. They wouldn't say how much they wanted. They just said that lot. And you had to think, well, hang on a minute. And they put their card in, and you got the impression, oh, yeah, they want the full total. But you might then have pensioners who drop £10 would drop out on the floor as they turned away. It was very much a community. Everyone had
Yes.
we had a toy club as well, where this was before, the internet again, where you had a brochure and people saved up for toys. And then I had
Yes.
to deliver them all at Christmas, keep them all there. You delivered them, got to know different households. Everything was happening there. So it was a real community. And there wasn't this feeling of, as I said, I think I was insured because of being a four counter branch. But I would say in general, with business in general, like managing agent, it was, it was a pleasure to serve the community because that's
Yes.
why you did it. You were in local, you wanted to be local.
Abs-
There
yeah.
wasn't the pressure, you took pleasure in it. There wasn't these stresses of, sort of nasty phone calls and letters and threats. And, it was, you felt, yes, I'm passionate about this, I'm community minded.
That
And
does seem to have been. I mean, the internet has been used as an excuse to erode that, so that more and more everything's done online. And even if that's not deliberate, let's just say perhaps that it isn't. I mean, people may have other thoughts, but
yeah,
even if it isn't deliberate, we've seen, to me, it's like, well, we've learnt that actually this is isolated people, put them on their own. They're now stuck in front of screens. Everything's difficult. There's no human being to talk to and say, I don't understand this. How do you do this? Everything's like you're just a number. You're just a tiny dot on a machine. And that human, and it does seem, I'll end with this because we'll have to wrap it up, but
yeah,
it does seem strange that here we are at the height of humanity, as it were, with the most sophisticated, cultivated that we've ever been, and
mm,
yet we've somehow allowed ourselves to be less community based, and isolated, poles apart from people, and those things that really worked 20, 30, 40 years ago, that was the glue that kept people together, has been taken away from us, which is something that perhaps we all ought to think about. And the trial by jury would definitely be a step in the right direction.
absolutely, because it would be the community judging a member of their community, and in judging them, knowing that they could also be judged by a member of their community.
Exactly.
So a totally democratic system, and it brings responsibility back for people. In the same way as people felt responsible at my post office. If they took something, they realised that it would dawn on, hang on, I've taken something. I'm being phoned up by a member of the community. I will take it back.
Yes.
Um,
I won't go in with that pram empty
yeah,
anymore.
I'll park the pram outside this time. I won't be
Yeah.
going in with it. You're right. So that community action, and we are humans. Yeah, how far they're going to take us to robots, I don't
Well,
know. But
exactly. That seems to be the plan. But I think some of us are beginning to wake up and realise, hold on a second, we are now too far behind the line,
mm,
or too far in the wrong direction, and we've got to pull back if we want a future for our children, particularly.
I agree. Yeah,
Edward, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. The time has just disappeared, as it often does. I'd be fascinated to hear people's or read people's comments, and people who like that, and whether they agree with you about trial by jury. I think it's absolutely essential, to be honest. And the question is, how do we get that? That's the thing. But Edward, thank you for the discussion. I've really enjoyed it, and for your insight into the Subpostmasters and the importance of an institution that we've, greater or lesser now, we've forgotten how useful and what a lovely place it was. With children having piggy banks and savings accounts and getting them to understand what money was and things, the whole thing.
Absolutely, yes.
And you don't see that anymore.
No.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much, Edward. I really enjoyed it. So there we are, sorry.
Thank you, Richard. I'll get my thank you in.
Yeah, absolutely. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with more monologues and other great interviews. Do bung a comment in the thing. It'd be lovely to hear from you. But from Edward and myself, thank you so much for watching. Till next time, goodbye.